talk about someone that everyone knows, we often think of the one without a nose. But to talk about the strangest of all the gods, the one who isn't a god but once led the gods, we have Loki, the trickster god. He's not an Aesir god, but always sits at the same table with the gods in Asgard. Though it's not rare for visitors to come over, making diplomacy and sitting with Odin, Loki was in a completely different position. Even more so, this god came from one of the races that had waged a thousand-year-long war with Odin. Loki is the son of Farbauti, a giant, Jotun in Norse mythology, the one known as the Thundermaker, and Laufey, another goddess in Norse mythology. The name Laufey means silver leaf. In Marvel, Loki is known as Odin's adopted son, Thor's half-brother. But in Norse mythology, it's different. He's Odin's blood brother, not adopted. What connects these two is nothing but knowledge. Loki, with his insatiable curiosity, traveled the world searching for odd games. There are no specific records of when or where the two met, but they probably bumped into each other at a tavern, had a drink, and became blood brothers. From then on, Odin took his brother into Asgard to live. It sounds wrong already, wrong in the best way. Loki truly deserved the title of Asgard's most charming. He knew it and took pride in it, and he was smart enough to exploit it. With this handsomeness, everyone wanted to like and trust him. But even at his best, it's hard to trust this guy, and in times of trouble, he's the one everyone should be most wary of, whether friend or foe. We all know that every character in a mythology has a purpose, and someone like Loki's role is almost like the end of the myth, Ragnarok, the Great War. But before accomplishing something great, it starts with the smallest things. Perhaps Odin never imagined that raising his own children would set the stage for the most significant event. Loki married a woman named Sigyn. With his street boy looks and smooth talk, it didn't take long for them to get together. They had two sons, Nari and Ali. Loki's family would be peaceful, and the godly line would be preserved in Asgard. But if it were that simple, it wouldn't be Loki. Sometimes he would disappear for a long time, leaving his wife waiting. But he always came back and sweet-talked her into forgiveness. Sadly, though she couldn't see, Odin could. Odin knew that Loki had gone to live with the giantess Angrboda. Newcomers often bring pain, don't they? Loki having another wife was no problem. But what concerned Odin were the children between the two gods. Odin could see more clearly than anyone with his inner eye that these children would be the ones to obstruct the gods. Loki said nothing but wore a victorious face while Odin broke into a cold sweat. The god of Asgard knew that if he didn't act first, he would be the one on the pyre. Of course, a round table meeting was called, and the oath of action was declared unanimously by the gods. Thor the Loudmouth was appointed as the commander and led a team of 7,749 elite gods to capture those they hadn't even seen before. They all journeyed to Jotunheim to see who was making Odin lose sleep. But before they could meet these children, they had to face countless dangers. With the gods' strength, they took down the giants one by one. Well, actually, there weren't many, just a few outcasts. They advanced toward Angrboda's fortress, but they didn't find her. Only her 3 children were there. But those 3 children were enough to make the gods understand why Odin feared them so much. So, what should they call these children? They didn't belong to the same species. One was a serpent, one was a wolf, and one was a half-rotten, half-living child. They wrapped the serpent around a tall tree. They chained the wolf with the strongest chain they had, making sure to muzzle it. The child was luckier, allowed to walk among the gods. Those walking to her left tried their best not to look at her, for all they could see were her blotchy spots, especially those who feared holes. But those walking on her right saw a beautiful girl smiling. It took a few days for everyone to leave the land of the giants, so they set up camp to rest. That's when Thor suddenly realized something felt off. How could they just barge into someone's home and take their children like that? Could it be that the giants wanted this? A shiver ran through the gods, but they reassured themselves, for the mission was nearly complete. They brought the 3 children before Odin to decide their fate, but something still felt wrong. Before they were captured, they didn't look like this. The serpent, now tied to the tree, had grown longer than the tree itself. According to the girl, its name was Jormungandr. Not only had it grown rapidly, but its poison was also thickening, and Thor had almost been struck by it before. If it hit Thor this time, his bones wouldn't survive, let alone his flesh. Odin knew this was still not its full size. It would grow long enough to encircle Midgard. But what to do with it? A spell like Avada Kedavra? No, it was still just a child. Odin decided to follow the dream's guidance, though he wasn't sure if it was right or wrong. Dreams always carry more than one can imagine. So Odin took it away from the nine realms to a place that was nothing but water and cast it there. He exiled it so that no one would know of its existence. How big it could grow, even Odin didn't know. But here, it could thrash around and he wouldn't have to be accused of killing the child of his brother. That was just one of three issues Odin had to resolve. The third child, Hel, didn't belong to either the world of the living or the dead. What's more, when Odin spoke with her, she proved to be polite and obedient, always saying yes. She also looked at Odin with fear, understandable since she was surrounded by strangers. But the girl was confident and made it clear that she preferred the dead, because when someone dies, they're all the same, unlike the living, who always fear her. Odin shuddered, not knowing whether to be happy or sad, but realized there was a place for this girl. This child would rule the darkest of things. She would reign over the dead throughout all the realms. She would be the queen of those who died unjustly, from disease, old age, accidents, and more. The gods all saw it, and the girl smiled. Odin said his farewells, unsure if he was doing the right thing, but didn't have time to think too much, as one of the three still awaited him. The one waiting was a wolf pup named Fenrir. But it was growing fast, exponentially. Every day it doubled in size. But what did that matter? After all, it was a child of a giant, and Odin wasn't afraid of giants. Odin wasn't afraid, but his dreams warned him to be cautious. In every dream Odin had, the last thing he saw was the yellow eyes and sharp teeth of this wolf. Was this a sign of the end for the greatest god of the North? Fenrir was a special creature, with the abilities of a divine being. Within days of being captured, it went from a pup to a monstrous creature as large as a giant. It ate non-stop in Asgard, and soon their food stores were running low. Odin didn't know what to do, and his dreams didn't help him figure it out. All the gods, even Thor, who struck first without hesitation, were reluctant to approach it. Of course they were. It could snap them in an instant. Only one god dared to approach it, treating it like a pet, Tyr. Tyr had also been to the land of giants, so he was familiar with it. But one person couldn't manage the situation, and soon it would grow beyond their control. The gods knew they couldn't keep this threat so close to them. Even Thor, with one strike, could fall to it. There were continuous meetings, but the main question was, how could they subdue it? They called it a meeting, but it was still Odin thinking of a solution. After all, in terms of wisdom, he was superior to most gods. And so the game began. The Asgardian forge worked day and night, creating a heavy chain and a binding. Everyone took pride in it, even naming it Leidingr. The gods were confident that this could bind anything, and no one could escape. The only thing left was to figure out how to get the wolf to step into it. Trying to trap it directly wouldn't work, so they had to sweet-talk it. The gods lined up around the wolf, constantly praising it, calling it the strongest wolf in the world, that nothing could challenge this divine beast, the destroyer of everything, the one who could turn chains into threads. Who wouldn't be flattered? Especially since, despite its immense size, Fenrir was still seen as just a child by the gods. So, casually, Thor wrapped the giant chain around Fenrir and locked the shackles around its leg. By now, the gods were laughing, convinced that they had it in the bag. But the gods' intelligence wasn't enough to match Fenrir's cunning. Fenrir stretched out, tensed its leg muscles, and the chain snapped into dozens of pieces, each one with an eye. It even gently lifted one strand, crushing it like Tron Kwok Tawayan crushing an orange. The giant wolf howled at the moon, a victorious cry looking down on the gods with contempt. Now you can add, "You're the best, right?" But who would be left to say it? All the gods had disappeared the moment the chain broke. Once again, only Tyr remained, continuing to feed Fenrir, congratulating it on its achievement. But his face betrayed his concern. Tyr knew better than anyone that the gods would never forgive Fenrir, not until it became 7 courses. While Fenrir sat, munching on its tasty meat, the gods scoured all of Asgard for the best materials to craft the chain. The forge was back at full capacity, forging a new, even stronger chain. Each link of the new chain was so heavy that an ordinary person couldn't lift it. It was made of the strongest metal the gods could find, iron from the earth mixed with iron from the sky. It was another source of pride, and a new name was formed, Dromi. But this time, tricking the wolf into wearing it would be the problem. It wasn't stupid enough to listen to the gods. So the gods donned their Kaido kid costumes and waited for Fenrir to fall asleep before sneaking up on it with the chain. But no one could sneak up on Fenrir, especially with its sharp senses. The only option left was to convince it. They told Fenrir this was the strongest chain the gods had ever forged, and if it could break free from it, it would become famous everywhere. It would be hailed as the mightiest wolf of the Nine Realms, greater than any god or even the father of gods. To Fenrir, there was no glory without a challenge. The chain might be big, but so was it. With Fenrir's permission, the gods chained it up. The massive wolf stretched and tensed its muscles, but the chain remained intact. The gods hoped this would last longer than the previous chain, but it only lasted 2 more minutes. Lucky for them, they stepped back just in time to avoid getting hit by Fenrir's movements. Fenrir celebrated, howling in triumph. But when it looked down at its feet, it realized only it was happy. The gods were disappointed, and Tyr was filled with concern. After many failed attempts, the gods held a council and realized they weren't the masters of crafting, the dwarves were. Time was running out, and every day Fenrir grew bigger, stronger, hungrier, and thirstier. No one was foolish enough to raise a beast that could eventually kill them. Odin summoned the bright elves, Skirnir, to send a message to the dwarves, demanding that they forge the strongest chain ever. Actually, it didn't have to be the strongest, just strong enough to hold Fenrir. The dwarves didn't want to do it, as there was no payment in it for them. But defying Odin meant death. So they agreed to do it, but they demanded materials: the step of a cat, a woman's beard, the roots of a mountain, a bear's sinew, the breath of a fish, and the saliva of a bird. Odin didn't understand any of this, but he was desperate. With all the materials gathered, the dwarves went to work, and thus Gleipnir was born. The name didn't mean much, but it was something special enough to make the gods stop and say, "What's this?" It was a soft, silky, glowing, and incredibly light ribbon, so delicate that a normal person could easily tear it. Yet there was something off about it, so the gods decided this was their last hope. They rushed to Fenrir's location, only to be shocked by how huge the wolf had become. Its footsteps echoed across the mountains, and no god dared challenge it. But the gods were confident now, so Fenrir became wary. When it saw the silk ribbon, it sniffed and immediately suspected a trick. Fenrir knew this was a trap set by the gods, a trap it had walked into on its own. Everything felt even more deceitful when the gods took it to the island of Lyngvi, near the dark Amsvartnir lake, to face the challenge. It avoided looking bad and refused the challenge, saying, "What's the point of this ribbon? Anyone could tear it. No glory here." But the gods weren't giving up. "You fear a ribbon?" they mocked, knowing the wolf couldn't escape if it were bound. In the end, Odin himself stepped forward, declaring that there was no trickery. This was a trial of strength and bravery, and the strong and courageous would break the chains while the weak would fail. Fenrir wasn't foolish, though. It knew Odin was lying, and that no one would free it once it was trapped. The gods would betray it and leave it to die on this desolate island. So the two sides bickered for days, no solution in sight. Finally, they decided to draw straws to choose who would put their hand in Fenrir's mouth. The moment Tyr raised his hand, the others understood. Fenrir would lose, and no one would leave unharmed. Never had the gods seen the wolf so docile, silently letting them wrap the silk around it. Fenrir struggled, stretching and tensing every muscle to break free, but the more it struggled, the harder it became to move. Every attempt made the silk stronger. The sound of the wolf's attempts to break free slowly turned into the god's laughter. Tyr remained silent. He could feel Fenrir's sharp teeth on his wrist, its warm, wet tongue on his palm and fingers. Fenrir knew what was coming. It was waiting for the gods to release it. But did it realize that it was considered death to the gods? No one would free themselves from their own death. Fenrir glared at Tyr, and Tyr responded with a quiet gaze. Fenrir snapped its right arm off and howled. "Odin, you liar! If you hadn't lied to me, I could have been your ally. You've let fear deceive you. I will kill you, father. I'll wait until the end of time, and then I'll devour the sun and the moon. But my greatest pleasure will be in feasting on you." Never before had the gods felt so helpless. They dragged the giant beast to a rock, chaining it down and using another stone to press it as deep as they could into the earth. Fenrir tried to bite anyone, but it was too late. The gods stabbed a sword into its mouth, and from then on it couldn't even close its mouth. Fenrir held on to its hatred, vowing that one day it would take revenge on the gods. Perhaps from the very beginning, Odin had marked his own death. If Odin hadn't done this, Ragnarok might never have come, and Fenrir could have been Asgard's protector. The gods outwitted Fenrir, but they weren't as clever as they thought. They were neither heroes nor villains, but what was the point of this? They had kept the one who could have tamed it, and no one knew what Tyr would think in the future or which side he would take. But Loki's children were far more than just Fenrir. He had other offspring that were unimaginable to anyone. This story began long ago when the gods first came to power and built Asgard. As the leaders, they had to create a place that was both hidden and secure, in perfect harmony with the mountains and surroundings. It had to be sturdy too if it was to protect them. But this task wasn't simple. Thor might have unbeatable strength, but he wasn't exactly the most skilled craftsman. This guy could build something ugly, and who knew when it would be finished. While struggling, he encountered a ragged man who asked to work as a mason for the gods. This guy looked just like a beggar boss, but he was riding another beggar boss. He promised to build a great wall, a wall so mighty that no giant could ever breach it. The gods couldn't ask for more, especially since even Odin feared an attack from the giants. How was this going to work out? The beggar wasn't in a rush. He assured them it would be done in a year. Odin rolled his eyes even though he was one-eyed. How could he finish it that fast? And he added, "You don't even need to pay me. I just want to marry the goddess Freya, the goddess of love and beauty, along with the sun and the moon." That's when it got ridiculous. A beggar asking for the most beautiful goddess of Asgard? This deal already sounded off, but the gods were crafty. They wanted the strong wall but didn't want to lose Freya, the sun, and the moon. This was a situation where Loki would have to come to the rescue. Loki never lacked tricks, and this deal was simple for him. The beggar could definitely build the wall, but how could he possibly build a wall around the entire palace, twice as long as the Great Wall of China, in just 1 year? Just let him build it. If he fails, he'll owe them for the contract. They'd just keep building the wall as much as he could, and if it wasn't enough, they could pick up the slack. Easy, right? Odin clapped his thighs, feeling proud as the smartest god in Asgard. Good deal. Good deal. Everything seemed to be in order, but the gods never expected that this beggar was no ordinary one. His horse was stronger than any god's, able to carry massive rocks from the mountains and seas back to the worksite. This guy wasn't just a mason. He did everything himself. And so the two worked together and the wall grew taller and taller. Day after day, month after month, the deadline approached and the wall was almost done. It didn't take much for the gods to realize they were in trouble. They called for Loki to handle it. If they failed and Freya fell into the hands of this beggar, Loki would likely only exist in the record books. It was up to them to save themselves. Loki sat down with the old man selling iced tea at the city gates to brainstorm a plan. After countless cups of iced tea and sunflower seeds, Loki realized that this beggar was only building the wall, while his horse was doing all the heavy lifting. All they needed to do was take the horse, and that would be the end of it. Kidnapping was easy. Whether man or horse, they both loved beauty. And just like that, the beggar lost his loyal companion. Without the horse, the work couldn't be finished. He turned into a giant and aimed to wreck everything. But killing giants was Thor's specialty. One hammer strike, and it was done. The gods won. The wall was almost finished, the enemy defeated, and they still kept Freya. But where was Loki? The last time they saw him, he was in a race with the two horses, literally tail to tail. Later, Loki returned with an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. But this wasn't the usual master-servant relationship. Sleipnir stuck to Loki unusually close, and Loki didn't seem to be an animal lover. Loki seemed strangely generous, handing the horse over to Odin, claiming that when it grew, it would become the fastest horse in the 9 realms, valuable to the gods. Loki suddenly became suspiciously kind, but who could say why? What this horse would become, whether a steed or a spy, would only be revealed in the end. Loki's children represented many things: nature, disasters, salvation, depending on how each person viewed it. But one thing was certain. While they were still small, the gods saw them as a threat. Because of this, they would look to destroy them, not teach them. Could this very decision lead to disaster for the gods themselves? This also symbolizes how humans should coexist with nature, not dominate it.